Okay, so this section is on the little red, the fire ant. And basically what we know, what we can do, and what we can do as a group to address this situation, which I have considered a crisis for a number of years, and how without just saying we're going to wait for the state to come save us, what do we do? And I want to start with these persons who are involved in different ways and let them share a little of their knowledge, and then pull together, is there some additional knowledge? I've heard ideas here from some of you, and where we can go as a group. So you want to come on up? And Jesse Ivan, UH, we'll start.
Hello, everybody. So I'm a fairly new applied entomologist here at UH Hilo. I did a lot of work on from Manoa with my PhD on insects, biodiversity, and applied entomology. And actually, these two are really your main resources first before me, because. But basically, insects are my life. I have lots of information about insect biodiversity and ecosystem interactions. So my role at the university is applied entomology, general entomology, and insect pest management classes. And my role with Little Red Fire Ants is I get lots of questions. I taught an academic class just this past semester, and my students, we looked at little fire ants control and monitoring for them on campus just as a class project, and giving that information to CAS. We just talked about it. So there's some very basic things that everyone can do, but realistically, as long as we can all realize what they look like and where they are and not move them around, that is my advice. And really, listening to the experts and talking with Springer King and Kessler Wood, they'll give you more information, but I can chime in if anyone has questions about kind of the general biodiversity components of insects and pests. Hawaii has incredible pests. Just because usually when we bring new crops here, we usually bring the key pest, and we don't always have the ecosystem, right? All of the other natural enemies that come with it. We don't have that here. So when we talk about resiliency, we have a very unique fauna here. Half of that is introduced. Did we introduce the right things? We don't know. A lot of times we don't know what is affecting what. So again, just like when Dr. Thomas was up here, there's lots of basic research that we need to have for agriculture, especially with diversified agricultural systems, with the pests specifically. And we're just not there yet. We all have to work together.
Hi, so I'm the manager of the Big and Invasive Species Committee, and as Jesse kind of said, we're doing this maybe in reverse order. We don't really deal directly with the little fire ants. So we have two projects that are really relevant for agriculture and for little fire ants. And the first is our nursery surveys. So BISC is not a regulatory agency. We essentially operate like a nonprofit. We're a university project. But what we can do, because we're non-regulatory, is we can be very friendly and helpful and not really put fear into anyone that we're going to come down and hit you with a fine or accuse you of breaking the law. So we're able to go and meet with nurseries, offer the service of serving the nursery. We're looking for invasive plants, talking to nursery operators, educating them about what plants are on do not plant lists that are considered highly invasive. A very, very small percentage of the plants that are here in Hawaii are of the non-native plants that are actually invasive. But the other thing we do is we take information that's developed by folks like Cass at the Hawaii Ant Lab to the nurseries, help them understand the material, help them figure out where to go for more information, and get them to agree to follow best management practices. And at the end of this whole process, we're promoting what's called the Plant Pono Endorsement Program, so that a nursery that wants to sign on to be responsible as far as not transporting invasive species into or throughout the state can become endorsed as following the best practices, and put that logo on any of their advertising materials and get advertised on the state website. It's nothing that says that you are certified, guaranteed you do not have little fire ants every second of every day that you might be doing business. but it does show that you're taking all the recommended steps to be a Pono business and to eliminate a low current problem in your street. The other thing we do, it's not so much related to the fire bans, but to sort of the topic here is albizia management. And so we're looking at different ways to manage albisias, to remove them from areas where they're a public safety hazard, remove them from native forests, but in the ag sector, figure out how we can utilize them as a resource and how people can, at a minimum, find some way to create value to reduce the cost of removing them to do crop farming or to actually make use of them as a resource themselves. And that's really an area where we need partners. We also want to float that idea to other people who are more engaged in that kind of work than they are. Mostly we're a weed management agency. So, and you know, I really appreciated Margaret Willie's statement that, you know, we can't wait for the states to save us. If they're not able to save us, it cannot be done. That ship has sailed. But that doesn't mean that we can't do things in our own properties and in our own businesses. And the main thing that this tries to teach people about is prevention. We teach people not to bring in invasive species because then we don't have to go out and kill them, and to not leave little fire ants around. No one seems to really appreciate prevention until you're already dealing with the pest. So just trying to promote that idea. So when we start talking about compost or creating compost businesses, it's something that we'd like to see happen, but it also scares us when in the invasive species management world. I think that's the best way to start spreading other things around that you don't intend to. But there's always a solution to those kind of things, starting to see. So we can work on those things. So I'll turn over the big man here.
Yeah, I'm not going to die soon. So my name's Cass, and unlike Jesse, who's an entomologist, I'm an ecologist, so ecosystems are my life. But I guess it gives a slightly different perspective to dealing with invasive species and pests. But my background's in forestry. I used to be a forest ranger, like Smoky Bear, the bigger area. And I grew up in Australia, where we have a wonderful, diverse range of ants. They're one of the most abundant and diverse insect groups that you'll find in forests. And when I finished all my academic studies, I was really, really good at a job that no one was going to pay me to do, because no one wanted an invertebrate ecologist on their staff. And then I sort of fell into dealing with invasive ants, which I actually was reluctant to begin with, but over the last 20 years or so, I've found it more and more interesting. So I look at invasive ants from an ecosystem perspective rather than an individual perspective, and it kind of changes the way you might deal with it. So currently I manage a little group of people called the Hawaii Ant Lab, and about 95% of what we do is directly related to managing, eradicating, providing extension advice on little fire ants in Hawaii. Most of that would be here in the Big Island. I've been there for 6 years. I came here from New Zealand on a 6-month short fixed term contract. Still here. So I'm doing okay. And our primary focus is really to give people the tools they need to manage this problem. If there's a chance of eradicating something, for example, if we find a small outbreak of LFA on a neighbour island, we really get excited about that and we give it a real big push. We can't eradicate LFA from the Big Island, which is physically, technically and economically not possible. So we focus most on how can people live with this particular problem. And this problem cuts across every aspect of our lives. It's not a single issue problem. The Department of Agriculture focuses on agricultural issues, and yes, LFA are an agricultural issue for nurseries, the green industry, production agriculture, forestry, but it's also an environmental problem. It's also a human health problem. It's an animal welfare issue. It really cuts across every segment of our lives. So it's one of those issues that has very easily can fall through the cracks between agencies and agency responsibilities. And I guess that's why we're here as a fairly kind of independent unit, because there are no pigeonholes to slot a response or a program that deals with invasive ants and some other invasive species fall into that same category. So hopefully while we're here, if you have any questions or if you have any advice or suggestions, I'd really like to hear them. If you need any help, our website is called littlefireants.com. Not very original, but easy to find. And there's a bunch of information there that might help. We also offer practical training sessions and a whole bunch of other stuff. So please don't hesitate to contact my team if you need any help in any issue that focuses or features any kind of invasive ant species. Thanks.
The first I heard about fire ant was really about a community in Florida, and well, one there and one in another state, and just where they became so pervasive that all of the agricultural, they just left the area, that all the workers deserted and were just being hit by all the fire ants that go up in the trees, everywhere. So that was sort of how I saw it as, like, here we are, and here we are, this paradise, and all the things that we grow, and we figure among ourselves about one thing or another, but, you know, ultimately, our future is tied to our environment and these ecosystems, and this is not only affects agriculture, but as you said, it's a animal, birds, they're blinded, dogs, cats. And the first incident I saw over in the west side, which was back in 2000, I can't remember what year, I was a little girl in Kemuela, and when it was down in the Kohala coast, and she was bitten all over and was in the hospital for a number of days. And that, and maybe one other, were the only two incidents that I knew of that were outside of sort of the general Puna area. And yet everyone was sort of going, this is a red flag, you know, we really should think about this, what are we going to do about it? And that's when we put together, I worked on this resolution, which isn't, I can see it isn't all that great, but at least trying to do what are some specific things we can do. And I'm just going to go through some of those, whereas this is what we should do, this is what we should do, and then sort of brainstorm what else and what can we do. I think at that point we didn't have CAS, we didn't have this little sites where to go, we didn't have Springer working on it, and we didn't have Jesse. So we have more resources, but it's also what can we as a group do. And I'll just, before I go through that, say, okay, there were two bills that in the state legislature that would have really helped us. There was one that wasn't so good, but where were we? You know, all of our legislators did not help. You know, there was a small amount of money coming to this island, and that bill did not make it through. You know, if we each look around, well, we probably represent all 9 or all 4 Senate districts and all whatever it is, House districts. How do we hold our legislators, state legislators, accountable to get them to sort of do a paradigm shift away from that the issue is how to keep these critters on the Big Island. And that is where it's at. And when Oahu, there was an outbreak, huge force. How do we just mobilize and do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't spread from that one location? So I think just going down, like having, I think, what Springer was saying, having businesses where they are recognized for following practices that address this issue. And if you have, I think, Gail, you mentioned that you want to just say one thing you said, or you spoke to Cass. You can ask him in terms of using both.
Sure. Well, actually, I'll refer to Pat in a second, but I was coordinating a natural resource restoration project in Kampala about 5 years ago, about 2009, and we ended this
Can
small.
you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I was coordinating a natural resource restoration project in Kohala in 2009. We ended up with this small fire ant issue, small little colony. Wasn't sure what to do, and I just met Pat, and he said, try bokashi. Imagine that. And it didn't work, and I don't understand it, but I know he's had success in a couple other little areas, so maybe he can speak to his
Yeah,
understanding
okay.
of why it worked.
Well, first of all, part of my work is to take care of the nice estates, especially down by the coast, kind of like Bobby Grimes' goal to really help clean up our coast because of the way it's been taken care of. In that, coconut trees are pervasive. I was taking care of many 120-some coconut trees. And the trimmers would come in and complain about ants in the coconut trees. I would say which trees, and I would treat those trees with bokashi and neem seed cake from India.
Tree. Around the bottom, basil?
So when I say treat, I mean I take a gallon of bokashi and a gallon of neem seed cake, and I broadcast it around the root zone of that plant. Not just by the stem of the tree, but around the entire root zone. Now, traditionally, what would happen is the property would be fairly clean for maybe a couple of years, and then we have 2 or 3 trees that would have ant outbreak. And so, in the beginning of my property care, I made sure the entire property got bokashi and the entire property got neem cake. As the property became healthier, I would only cite those trees that really needed it, and I would cite them with the bokashi and the neem cake. Now my trimmers are angry because these are biting their eyes, they're biting inside their ears, they're up in the air, they're trying to do their work, and so I felt very compelled to make sure that they came back to my job and didn't have that kind of problem. Now I have another property that I've worked with over at Mauna Kea for about 4 years, and we've recently had fire ants show up over there. Now I did have fire ants show up at this other property, and I didn't think anything of it. I put bokashi on it. I never saw them again. So I thought, oh, that worked. Kind of like, and didn't use deep cake. Now the one at Mauna Kea, my guys showed me, we were there on the job, and we saw about a 1-foot pile of the ant action. Pretty big. And I lived in Florida too, in ant neighborhoods, so I know fire ants well. So seeing that, I went, oh wow, right to the truck, grab bokashi, put it all over there. I said, guys, let's keep an eye on this. I need to know what's happening here. So the next week, we saw that disappear. I said, hey, they're gone. Look at that, guys, they're gone. And my friend said, no, over here, look. They had moved 10 feet away, closer to the driveway, and now they're about maybe a 3-inch circle. Population had moved. They moved. We hit it again with bokashi, and to date, we haven't seen them show up again. Now, I didn't do the peanut butter and send them off laboratory. I did the practical finger test, yeah? Oh, who's biting me? Oh, that one bit me. Yeah, that's red. That one bit me. Oh, it's the red fire ant. Okay, that's a little guy. Yeah, that looks like the same thing. So, practically, I felt that the bokashi, when we talk about in EM technologies, is that ants are farmers. Ants eat fungi. The bokashi is in direct opposition to the fungi they produce. Because it's a multitude of microorganisms and balanced fungi, it destroys their food stores. So now they have to move in order to farm again. The toll is about 90%, as we can see, on the first move. In other words, 90% of the population go wiped out because of no food. That 10% moves on to the next and tries to make it again. If you hit them again, you've wiped out that. You have a certain number of ants, I don't know what the magic number is, a certain number of ants have to survive in a group before the whole group can survive. You can't just have one ant, right, to survive. So by knocking down the food stores, it seems, in my understanding, it seems to have knocked out the ant. I have not seen that ant back on my jobs yet. That's been my experience.
I have a few questions. I don't want to turn this into a technical discussion because that wouldn't be worthwhile, but there are about 30 species of ants on this island that sting. How sure are you that the one you're talking about is little fire ants?
That's a good question. I only identify it because I have been into integrated pest management for a very long time. I do study the new insects that come into our state, I, give advice on how to control them through neem applications.
So you say you recognise them because you lived in Florida and you saw those there?
Yeah, but the Florida red ant's not the same one we have here.
No, they're not.
No, I'm just saying the nature of the
I
fire.
suspect that the species that you're talking about is a species called Solenopsis geminata. It's been here since World War II. The species we're talking about is Wasmannia horipunctata, which arrived here about 15 years ago. Wasmannia is less than a millimetre in size. It's the size of a piece of coarse cracked pepper.
Very small.
Solenopsis geminata are about 1/4 of an inch in size. Solenopsis geminata live in mounds on the ground. Little fire ants have no obvious nests. You will not find a little fire ant nest, they don't make a nest. So I'm concerned that the species you're talking about is not the species that we're talking about.
That may be true.
So why don't, at some point, if where you are and you find some, send them off, see what the law says?
There's no record of LFA at Kohala, ever. We do not know of any infestations in Kohala. It's probably too dry for them there. in
Over
most places.
the west side, like Bodicare.
Yeah. You will only find little fire ants in shaded, moist habitats.
These are irrigated lawns and it wasn't a shade.
You will not find little fire ants living in irrigated lawns.
Okay,
Can I turn
very
that to?
good. Thank you.
So that's the first one.
Oh, you have more?
I'm not.
It seemed to control the other ants,
Yeah,
so
I'm
is
not
there any
familiar-
cross
That was my
application?
next question. I'm not familiar with your methods, but I'd very much like to do some objective testing with it, and then, as opposed to an anecdotal, I threw some stuff here at work. That's step one of science is, hey, this might be a good idea. I'm quite happy to take that further and do what we call an elimination trial, where we take some candidate things, try them, and go, yeah, this didn't work. Hey, this one did. You never know.
Right.
I have people give me a lot of crazy ideas. Most of them are well-meaning crackpots. Some of them are just plain crackpots.
Which one is it?
Other people are well-meaning, but of those 1,000 ideas, there's normally one gem, and so I don't stop listening.
Have you done any research on fungicide
No.
effect? Like he's saying, just using a fungicide to kill off the food source.
The food source for little fire ants, and most invasive ant species are in fact sources of carbohydrate.
Yep.
Flowers, fruit, extrafloral nectaries, homoptera, scale insects, mealybugs, plant pests.
Dead birds and things like that.
Well, that's not carbohydrate, that's protein. Now, the only part of the colony that requires protein are the queens, because they're laying eggs, and the keiki, who are growing. So an adult worker ant, on pupating, doesn't molt, doesn't grow, has a very finite life of several months, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3. So the bulk of what's required by the colony is carbohydrate, sugar. A very small amount of protein is needed to feed the queens the keiki, and then lipids, oils, are a storable form of energy that they would, ants generally fatten themselves up on ahead of some lean times. The major source of nutrition that an ant colony needs are these carbohydrates. Little fire ants are the best farmer of any form of homoptera, sap-sucking insects that poop out sugary stuff, mealybugs. And so what they do is they ranch these little insects. They need the insect, B, they need a ranch, and a ranch would be a tree of sorts. And a lot of our trees here are very susceptible to those sort of things. So these ants will actually actively move them around, milk them, look after them, protect them from the natural predators. So from an ecosystem perspective, what they're doing is they're redirecting all the energy in the ecosystem to them. Much the same way as we do. Very much the same way as we do. They're actually a bit better at it. And that's why we can get these massive population densities. So if you live in an infested area, if your property is infested, every square foot of your land will contain on average 2,000 little fire ant workers and about 4 queens. If you live on a 1/4 acre lot of land, like an 8,000 foot, 10,000 foot block of land, and you took all the little fire ants off it and laid them end to end, and they're a millimetre in size, you can make a trail from here to Kirkstown and possibly a little bit further. That's the density that these animals are capable of getting to in the right environments.
So do they actually have food stores in their nests?
No.
They're not storing. The sugar that they do accumulate, they eat readily. The sugars that they're gathering, they eat readily.
Yeah. They
I got a
prefer.
question, if you've done any research on Paul Stevens, who's the most like fungal researcher that I'm aware of, but he's developed a little fungal thing, some kind of some strain of fungal stuff that actually like eats the ant from the inside out and
Show me
then
some
turns it
data.
into a spore.
I'm a born skeptic. Not only am I Dutch, I'm a Dutch scientist. I'll help you all. Show me the data. Show me the money. Because I'll bet, and like I said, there are well-meaning people, there are well-meaning crackpots, and there are crackpots, and there are some good scientists. I don't know the source of those data. I would suspect that if you had a solution that's practical and could be implemented in the field, that the red imported firing problem on the mainland, which is a $5 billion plus a year problem, would be the first place you would see that research applied. My network of colleagues through the US focus primarily on reefer. The only person I know that has done some work on fungi, good work on fungi, is actually a local Hilo boy, David Hoy, who's based at ARS in Gainesville. He does do some fungal work. He has spent, I think, about 15 years on looking at that as a natural control. It's effective, but it's got no distribution method. Still, and I know him, and he's way smarter than I am, so I will defer to him. And I'm quite happy to give you his contact details, and you can contact him directly. So not only is a Hilo boy, he's a really clever one, and every time I meet him I say, hey, you should come back home. Surely there's a job here somewhere. We need guys like you. And his parents live in town here somewhere, and they're getting a bit old, so I keep on trying to get him here. Maybe one day he will, but he'd be the guy for that sort of work. My problem is not a far down the track solution. My problem is the person who calls me at 3 o'clock or 2:30 and says, I've got a problem now. I need help now. So I focus on what I can do now. That's the limit of what I can do with the resources I have.
And when somebody does say, we have them at my farm, there aren't, we just discovered this patch, then what do you do?
Our website has a lot of good information. If a person is running an agricultural enterprise, I would encourage them to come in and just talk storybooks. And we can go through with them practical management methods that can help deal with this problem.
Who's currently funding your project?
I'm on what's called non-recurring competitive grants. So my tenure is limited to my ability to get grants.
Okay. Are you guys writing them kind of yourselves to kind of keep this
Well,
little
no
fire?
one else is going to do it for me.
Right.
I'm on an E3 specialty exchange visa. If my grant runs out, I have 10 days to leave the country. That's going to give me just enough time to find someone to feed my dogs, water cut my lawn. I won't be able to pay my mortgage. I've got 31 motorcycles. How the hell am I going to do that? So I write my own grants, and I try really hard because I don't want to leave. And that is an issue that it's been a historical issue.
One of the issues for me is the sort of the stigma attached. Is you find them and sort of do you really want to advertise to the rest of the world? Oh my gosh, my farm, my landscape business, my whatever has these fire ants. And sort of how does one work around that? And I think that was one of the reasons the one bill in the state that was sort of gave penalties and fines if anyone was found to transporting them off of this island and over to one of the other islands. But how does one get around that stigma and where people feel safe and here's my business and got my landscaping company and then go in and is this gonna get advertised and how do we get around that? I mean, part of it is identifying where they are and mapping them. And I think the little girl that I heard about had bought a plant or some plants when she was over in Puna and brought them home. And it wasn't something that was, a tree or something in their outdoors, but then it is, do you make every person that is moving plants around, whether it's Walgreens, Lowe's, all of this, say, and this plant has been checked. We are doing this. Do we ask whoever we buy plants from if they have, if they've taken the necessary precautions? I mean, otherwise, we can get where we're the entire island, and it's just a matter of we're mowing the grass and just keeping them down, and we're all getting bitten, and our animals are getting bitten, and going on. So I'm just going to go start on this side.
Is there anything being done at a county level to help reduce costs for treatment for the farmers? I'm over in El Pijico. 6 of the 10 farmers on my side road in the last 4 years have left the island because they cannot make money in agriculture anymore because of the fire ant problem and the treatment. Tango being very effective, but way too expensive for them to even get involved in. Is there anything going on with the county level, talking with manufacturers of Tango or some treatments where we can bring the cost down to the point where the farmers can buy the things that can keep the ants away and then continue to make money as a farmer?
When you answer that, would you explain what Tango is?
It's a complex question. In terms of the state or the county funding or assisting individuals with a particular problem, that's not my culion. You really need to talk to the county. And my mathematical mind says that if the county is providing me with some kind of subsidised product, I'm actually paying for it through my property tax anyway. Sure. So it's like, I don't see that. I would have one exception to that, and we get a lot of telephone calls coming into that, and quite regularly on a daily or weekly basis, I'll get a call from an 86-year-old lady who lives up the street. Her husband's passed. The kids are off island. She has a very meagre pension, just enough to buy rice and spam, pay the bills. Her property's overrun by fire ants. Her only joy in life is working in the garden. What do I tell her? She can't afford an exterminator. She's got nobody to do the work for her. She sure as hell isn't going to be able to treat her property. She's probably in a walking frame. If there was a candidate for an agency like the county or the state to provide assistance, that'd be the candidate that I would kind of say, well, there's an exception, because this person can't get out of where they are. For agriculture generally, it's just going to be a cost of production.
I got farmers talking about class action suits against the state because they've done nothing to help them, and they buy a property for $750,000 in 5 years. It's not worth a quarter of that because nobody wants to touch it. Well, and it's at that point, is it the farmer's fault?
Well,
No, whose fault is it? Of course, as America, we got to point fingers at someone.
It's our fault. It's our fault because the spread of invasive species, and I'm going to take a big picture here, is a consequence of commerce. Actually, it's a cost of trade. So we have invasive species on this island because we buy shit from somewhere else, and with that comes attached invasive species. If we were totally, wholly, completely self-sufficient as a state or an island, we wouldn't have that problem. You can't blame the state.
Well, we can all take responsibility.
Who within the state would be responsible for that? I'm trying to save your friends a lot of legal costs for something that I'm pretty sure would fail.
Yeah, but they still want to, I mean, they're charging ahead with the idea.
You know, and that's our problem. We're faced with this issue, and the first thing we're thinking of is we've got to find someone to blame.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are new to this island, that I get into my office, they come to my office, they look at someone, if someone's at fault, it's not me, who can I blame for this?
Right, and so
The
part of
people who've
this
been here longer,
what we can do.
the people who live here longer, come to my office and say, I've got this problem, can you help me manage it? So they don't look to blame someone, they're looking to fix it.
Right. And
So I think we need a fundamental shift in the way we treat these issues.
So right now, we don't have a solution.
okay, so Lynn, Lynn,
I think there's two things that people should know about. One is that whenever you buy a plant, and my husband and I have been trying to educate about the fire since it showed up on the island, is you have to tax, you have to take responsibility, do the peanut butter stick, go take it out of your car till you do it, and check for ants, and then go from there. The other thing is if you get dump mulch, do the same thing. We use dump mulch all the time, but we always test. And then after we dump it in one pile, a couple weeks later, we test all around that pile again. We keep testing. So we have to take responsibility ourselves. The other thing is there are some young people starting businesses right now, and they'll come and treat an acre of land for $30 and with their own tango. And they are very astute at going out and kind of checking trees and saying, well, there's a bigger infestation over here, or talking to the jungle. They, however, cannot keep up with the amount of work that they're getting calls for as the reputation spreads. And so what they would like to do is set up within each community a point person that they work with, who send them out and have the community have their own supplies, and then they would come out and mix it and help the people treat the area. So, I think it is unfortunate, it's here and it's in our laps and it isn't fair, but we have to deal with it in some way. I do know that the state did and may still have, from what I heard, a subsidy program for Kofi Frog, where they still let people, pay for people to treat. And I'm not quite understanding why they don't have something, similar to what this gentleman said, where they have some type of program like that also to help maybe some of these enterprising young people buy in bulk at lower prices or whatever. So, I think there are some, not solutions, but some help.
right. Yeah, Glenn is here from the county administration, and he just started a couple weeks ago, so they sent him over. You want to speak up?
Let me just address that Kofi issue that you mentioned. It's not a state program, it's a county program. We have made vouchers available to purchase citric acid at, I think it was $60 a bag, something like that, which is probably half the cost of the citric acid. Now we're making arrangements to set it up so that those on the corner side, the west side of Hawaii, will be closer to you over there rather than coming all the way to Hilo to buy the voucher at HCEOC and then picking it up at CPS. So we're trying to work on that part. But otherwise, we do have cooperators who have these sprayers available that you can borrow. You're going to have to fill out some paperwork and then pick up your citric acid, and then you can spray your lot for you. But I mean, it's not like county employees are going out to spray for Koki frogs for you. So that's about it for that Koki issue. Thank you.
Okay, so Lynn, maybe you could get to me some of that information as to who those people are. I mean, it seems like this would be something where people are looking for jobs, and if there's more business, and how do we get a point person? I mean, there are also county grants. R&D has grants. Then the county has granted aid, where if there's an organization, a nonprofit is putting it in, can go seek money there. Each of the council members have contingency funds and work on it, just like there's, look at the Koki frog. That, the Koki frogs were sort of in one place, and then it got more and more and more, and what happened? It is, as Cass saying, people that have the problem and come in, But it is also, I see at the different levels, there's a community level as well, and there's a county level. And I was, I'm just going to read down, these are the kind of things that we put together, suggestions, just brainstorming back in 2008, that we do a mapping of areas where that it's not existent, that people identify, so we have a map, that we do have some inspection going around and just randomly checking places and sort of keeping some kind of an eye on what's going on, and that would somehow hopefully encourage people that have the problem not to wait till there's an inspector, and that the county do a public education campaign. I also thought, well, every time perhaps we should have it, that we've got to be such a crisis and we don't want our island to be quarantined. I just want you to know the attitude in Honolulu is, let's just, as long as it's down there, it's okay. Do we require people to hand out, this has been checked for Little Road fire ants, or to be aware of the problem, and if you do find them, if you don't want to sit around and do a peanut butter test and send it off. So public education. And then that we set up a Little Red Fire Ant task force, maybe it'd be through the council administration, and connect to the state and federal for assistance and education, controlling research. Look how he could leave in 10 days. Maybe even his motorcycle's behind.
Well, first, I'm not leaving. And two, I'm not leaving my motorcycles behind. Don't worry about either of those two.
And then we put in here that by May 1st, 2009, the county administration is requested to present a progress report to the White County Council on county efforts to control little fire ant infestations on the island, including an assessment of possible state, federal, private funding sources for research and containment of this. So that didn't happen. So when I finally then decided to run for election and got elected, then I called the park, this was before Glenn was there, to come to a presentation, and basically they said they were really looking at this as more of a state issue and had not really done a lot, but that we now have cash available to help. And further resolve that should county funding be necessary, such as for possible monetary reimbursement for bait acquisition to private individuals, addressing that, the county administration is strongly urged to allocate that funding in 2009, 2010. So I'm just this has sort of been one of my issues, and how do we push it from the ground up and county level. So, if I do introduce something, whether it's on alternative solid waste or on this issue, I hope that a number of you are able to show up, and let's see what we can do. I think we do have a number of ideas, and I think as you all are on this network, and we'll try to get some information out about this and see where we are and see what ideas other people have, and get some feedback.
Just to chime in with Tango as an active ingredient specifically, it's expensive to buy if you're only going to use it on your property. I'm fairly certain that there was a co-op or a group of people associated with CTAR at Komohana Research Center that had pulled that together to subdivide. So it gets into a real dicey issue when you're dealing with concentrated, it's a pesticide. It's labeled by the EPA as such. It's a growth regulator. It's very safe. But if you subdivide active ingredients of pesticides, you have to have the labels and all that stuff with it. And that is information that everyone needs to have and follow. And whether or not the county would be willing to do that, we can talk to Derek at H2A and stuff like that. But there's a lot of steps that need to happen to deal with pesticides. And that's part of the process. And look, Blue Red Fire Ants, they're not going anywhere. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jesse. I can add a bit to that. We've been working with the manufacturer of Tango, which is a concentrate, and Crop Production Services, which is one of our local pest supply companies, and a repackager for about 2 years or 3 years. And as a result of that, users can now buy Tango in a 1 pint bottle for, I think it's 50, 60 bucks. If you live on a normal house lot, a 1 pint bottle would last you a year. If you think $60 for a year's worth of chemical is too much, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Agricultural producers need a hell of a lot more. The cost of Tango is actually, it's interesting that the guy within the manufacturing company to help me owed me a favour, and he priced it really well. And I know this because a couple of years earlier I wanted to buy some what's called technical grade active ingredients, just a straight chemical with nothing mixed in with it. And the price to get a quart of technical grade active ingredient was $1,000 US. In a 20 pint bottle of Tango, there is a pint of pure concentrate. And that bottle sells for $650. So the cost to the manufacturer of just the actual TGA for that 120 pint bottle is $500 before they do anything to it, before they formulate it, before they stick it in a bottle, before they put the label on, before they pay the very heavy fees to get it registered and then transport it. So the actual cost of the concentrate I don't think is all that bad, and it's equivalent to most other solutions.
I mean, one of the questions here is, what research is going on, and we spent the morning talking about how we get away from chemicals and how we do this, and now we're looking at here's the one thing that's dealing with it. So if you have your organic farm and suddenly those little critters show up, well, exactly what do? I mean, then you're calling it. So it's really addressing it on how do you deal with people who have a problem, how do you keep from getting it, and also how do we do the necessary research from ideas. That's how we brainstorm, and that's how we figure things out and trying different things.
I can talk about the toxicity too.
Yeah, okay, and we're just going to try to wind up pretty quick, but Mary?
Well, I did receive an email that powdered sugar and baking soda would, could effectively kill off the fire ants. Has anyone tried that?
It won't work.
What's that?
It will not work.
It will not work.
How about boric acid and honey?
That's a good mix for some ant species. You'll be better off using a lipid or a protein matrix. The problem with honey is that the little fire ants have got this, they're farming this form of sugar that they really like. And then you put some other sugar in front of them, and they'll go, we like that stuff up there. Lipids, fats, and proteins, like meats, they're actually in short supply in those ecosystems because they can't farm them. And they've exhausted supply, they've killed off everything that's in there. And it becomes very attractive. So if you use a lipid matrix or a protein matrix instead,
And what do you mean by a lipid matrix?
Oils. There's a recipe on their webpage. If you find fact sheet number 6, it actually says, this is the recipe for using boric acid to make a bait. Don't forget that boric acid in itself is actually quite toxic, so please be careful.
Okay, so I'm just going to do 2 last comments, and Lynn.
You brought up a good point about organic farmers and that, once you treat with tangle, you know the problem. Is there any chance that would become more, could somehow get certified on like a special Hawaii island or even tangle for organic farmers? Because
that'd be a question for the certifying agency, and there are various certifying agencies. Generally, they're very tight. Methylprednisolone, the active ingredient, is kind of on the border. To give you an idea of the toxicity of methylprednisolone, or of Tango, if you want to, when they work out how toxic stuff is, they use lab rates. And the toxicity of the chemical is normally expressed in the amount of chemical per unit of body weight needed to have a 50% chance of killing an animal. So if you get this poor rat, feed it this particular chemical, how much do you need to feed it in one dose to have a 50% chance of killing it? For the Tango bag, that's called LD50, lethal dose 50. The Tango bag, it's 12 times the body weight of the lab rat. So if you had a 1 kilogram lab rat, in order to kill it with Tango, you'd have to feed it 12 kilograms of Tango, which is just not possible. So the only way to kill a lab rat with Tango is to keep it in the bottle and kill it. Keep it around the head until it's dead. That's how toxic methotrexate is, and that's why I like it, because there are other solutions that that are especially synthetic pyrethroids, which are great and they're very safe. But when you've got 100,000 people on one little island, each using it to solve their problem, that shit's got to go somewhere, and it's going to go down in the water table. You'll be drinking it in 2 weeks' time, and your fish will be swimming in it. So we really focus on finding the least toxic way to deal with this problem. And again, we take an ecosystem or landscape perspective to what we do.
Okay, last.
How would you recommend treating a load of felt mulch for fire ants, little fire ants?
It's very difficult. There would be 2 ways to do it. One would be to use baits which are of low toxicity, but then you're really looking at a 12-month process to be absolutely sure you've got them out. You could use residual pesticides that have a residual life, and there are a whole bunch on the market. I don't think any of them are registered for drenching a whole pile of mulch, but that would be a possibility. When I was working in Brisbane on red imported fire ants, we'd actually developed a heat treatment machine, which cost a lot of money. Treated mulch and soil with heat.
Would the ants survive the silage type of process? With that green waste?
Yeah, they would.
If we enclosed them and put microorganisms and digested it, would they survive that?
Given time, quite possibly no. It depends on how thick the silage skin was, because they can eat away through plastic. So it's, yeah, I need to test it. Heat would be a good way. If you could find a way of heating stuff up to about a temperature of about 150, and if you can keep it there for an hour or so, then you certainly kill off the ants and a lot of other pathogens as well.
I think that's been one of the reasons why there's been a preference to have compost rather than mulch. And I know speaking with Linda Peters, and I've heard things. So there's little ants at the county mulch center, or they're afraid there is, and she said that it is tested a lot. Linda, I don't know if you want to just that you are testing regularly. It's just that if there aren't any little fire ants on Monday, that doesn't mean there aren't some on Tuesday. And as you talk about the county and our liability, and we're passing out basically a raw product. And it's, or at the same time, I think what Cass was saying, how we bring things in. How many of us go into the store, and I really like blueberries and cherries, where they're not from here. Maybe, do we discipline ourselves enough that we say, okay, I'm only going to eat local fruit. I'm only the things that, vegetables that are here, and not, part of all this population issue. It's also how we consume, what is our consumption, and what is, how we live our lives to reflect that our environment and the ecology. So it really is a multi-layered issue, and I will work on it from county level, assuming I get reelected, and spend some time on that one of these days.
I just want to recommend to everybody who hasn't taken the Little Fire Ant workshops to sign up. You learn so much. I've ridden my property of little fire ants.
Okay, thank you. So we're now, when